Today on Locked On Red Wings, we're going to begin our grades for the Red Wings offense this season.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty is also a host over at Locked On Tigers.
Locked On Harold Castro.
Locked On Alex Faedo.
Yes, sir.
Right now,
yes, sir.
Four-game
big
winning
boy
streak.
dub.
Longest winning streak in the MLB right now, currently, Scotty.
Yeah, it was the longest before even it was the longest at 3. So
I think that says a lot more about the state of baseball, though.
We're big boy streaking.
Big boy streaking. We here on Locked On Red Wings, however, are going to begin. Actually, it's why I wore the Tigers hat, by the way.
That's nice, man.
The little American League logo on the side. I like that. I just like it. It's a nice little.
It is. It's a cool hat.
It's cool. Yeah.
Cool, man.
Here over at Locked On Red Wings, however, we're going to begin, and I say begin because there's 16 forwards that we got to grade this season because it was, as my favorite word tends to be this season, carousel of forwards for the Red Wings. And so we set our baseline minimum yesterday as 10 games played for players we're going to grade, and a lot of forwards
on the roster the last game of the season,
yes,
not traded.
Yeah, not traded away. So no Nemesnikov, unfortunately, who he gets A+, whatever. So despite that minimum of 10 games, there are still plenty of forwards, 16 total, that we have got to grade. And we have to start with the ones that people are going to want to hear about the most. But the way we're going to break this down is, today we're going to talk about the top line. So Larkin, Lucas Raymond, and then Tyler Bertuzzi. I know he spent time on first and second line, but for the purpose of this, once Nemesnikov was gone, it was him at
the beginning and a lot at the end.
Yeah. And then after that, because we don't want to give you all the most interesting players in the first episode.
We don't want to do the whole top 6 at once, and we can mix in some fourth liners within the first liners and just knock out 6 in a show, and that's more efficient that way for everybody.
We're going to spread out the talent just like Jeff Blashill did on these
Absolutely.
2, maybe 3, depending on how fast we get through these forwards. But I imagine that we'll get through the least amount of forwards on today's episode, especially as I keep lollygagging here. Just because there's so much to say about this top line. And I guess we should probably lead off, just like yesterday we led off with Moritz Seider. We should probably lead off with the forward who saw the most success this season in Dylan Larkin. Yep. Scotty, just to give a little background for the people out there, Dylan Larkin, as many people know at this point, he played 71 games played, had 69 points, 31 goals, and 38 assists on the season. He was a fantastic two-way player doing goals, scoring assists. He would have broken his career high in point totals if not for an injury that he sustained right after the All-Star break that ultimately knocked him out near the end of the season where he needed surgery. Scotty, what kind of grade do you give the captain, Dylan Larkin?
An A. I think that's pretty straightforward. If he was to play like 80, like the only way I would have given him an A+ is if like he eclipsed like 95 points. Like if he was like pushing 100 points, that would have, I guess, I would have given him an A+. But this is a pretty easy A for me. He was, first full like real season, I guess I would say, as the captain. None of the like weird scheduling, and we had fans and everything. And he was great, maintained point a game pace throughout pretty much the entirety of the season. Played hurt for at least a little bit.
Still produced
at the end of the season as well. And while the production may have dipped a little bit from when, in the first half at a point he was over a point a game. So it might have evened out a little bit, but was still productive. And I think the biggest thing with him, kind of like we talked about in the last episode, just going through and talking about expectations and how each letter grade is based off who we're grading. And I just, if going into the season, the big question for a lot of people was still, can Dylan Larkin be a 1C on a contending team? And I think this season that he proved that he could, not necessarily that he needs to be the, or that he, I don't even know how to word what's in my brain right now. Not necessarily that
Me every day of my life.
that not necessarily that he is the like bona fide 1A, and you don't need to give him like very much talent around him, like kind of a player, right?
Yeah, he's
But
not like Connor McDavid who can fly down the ice and do it all himself.
right, yeah, but um and he could be like, no one would complain, obviously, if we got some other like top end 1C that would either play like a lot of minutes at the 2C or move Larkin down to 2C. I don't think anyone would like obviously complain about that, but I think that he proved in his play this year at least enough that he can be the 1C for a contending team, and with that is why it's a pretty easy A for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you look at the advanced metrics as well. I mean, obviously, we know what he did on the ice, point total wise, which again would have crushed his career best at that point. But he also led the Red Wings with the best expected goals above replacement with 18.4, and his expected goals above replacement actually exceeded his real goals above replacement, which would tell you that despite how well he played, given the position he was putting himself in and putting others in, the Red Wings should have had more points because of Dylan
Right.
Larkin. Dylan Larkin should have gotten more points based on the situations he was putting himself into and the situations he was creating. So not only was he having a career year on his own, it could have been even better if the team around him could have finished on those chances. Now, the only knock on him is his defensive percentages in the 13th percentile this season.
Mm-hmm.
But he just barely finished negative, and a lot of that again has to do with the people around him. His even strength defense expected goals above replacement was like a -2, where his expected goals above replacement for even strength offense was like 15. But the team's
Sure.
defense as a whole was really, really bad. So it's one of those
Yeah,
things
I
where
don't
you take
think
that into account. It's really not just Larkin. It was more of a overarching problem.
right. I don't think people realize how difficult it is. Well, I shouldn't say that people don't realize. I'm sure a lot of people do realize it. Just a figure of speech. I think it's interesting that it is so difficult to play like a really lockdown individual defensive game when like no one else on your team is. Like when you have poor team defense, it's very hard to have good individual defense, especially in the game of hockey, because the positioning changes a whole hell of a lot, right? If you don't have faith in the rest of your team defensively, as I'm sure, I mean, you obviously being a defenseman can attest to the difference of strategy and the difference of positioning and all of that. When you're on a good defensive unit and a poor defensive unit, you know what I mean? So I think that while that is something that you would like to see higher, and it's not a complete bailout, it's also very difficult to have one and not the other.
Yeah, I mean, despite the slight negative connotation that comes with him being like a -2 and even strength defense, overall he is a top 10% player in the league when it comes to goals above replacement. He ranks in the 90th percentile, so top 10%. His even strength offense alone or total offense alone is 95%. So when it comes to just
Right.
calculating his offense, he's top 5% in the league at generating offense. So, I mean, that just goes to show how good of a player he is and further reinforces how wrong a lot of us probably were about whether or not he can be that, a leading center on a Stanley Cup contender. His shooting percentage this year, again, was a close to 15%. And when I say again, last year he slumped pretty badly, and this year he came back and he was above the league average in shooting percentage, especially in a game. What I'm trying to say here, now I'm struggling with words. A game where goaltending is never been better, especially if you saw Jake Ottinger the other night. So he exceeded expectations for almost everyone. I know, and we talked a lot about that yesterday. All these grades are different for every individual person based on the expectations given to them. And the expectation for Dylan Larkin was, yes, to have a much better year than he did last year. But I don't think either of us were really, our expectations coming in the year were for him to have a career year like he would have had if he had not gotten injured. And so, I mean, he's an easy A.
Easy A.
Easy A. Just like Built Bar, imagine dipping your finger into that plastic tub of birthday cake. I'm trying to do this while I do the read. And then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That is what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and they're actually really damn good.
So good. They're so good. I'm crushing my box. It's crazy how good it is.
That's a clip. With 150 calories, 16 grams of protein, and 9 grams of sugar, this limited time flavor is an amazing option if you are looking for a healthy way to get flavor and variety in your day. All Built Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And they're made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Go to Built.com and get birthday cake puffs now. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, segment 2. We are beginning to do our grades for the forward core of the Detroit Red Wings. And we did Dylan Larkin. We both agreed A. Let's move on now to the rookie, who early in the season, Scotty, we really thought was probably going to be a Calder finalist. Now, he still had a really damn good season, despite the fact that he didn't finish as a finalist. He had 57 points in 82 games played. He was, much like Seider, he was one of the 3 players on the Red Wings who played all 82 games. And that's astonishing for a 19-year-old, then turned 20-year-old rookie playing on the top line of an NHL team. He had 57 points, 23 goals as a rookie, and a total of 34 assists. So another player who is easily getting goals and easily getting assists, especially at the front half of that season. Scotty, what are you going to give Lucas Raymond?
I think this is a pretty easy A as well. This is, I think the only thing that could have made this an A plus is if he won the Calder. I think this is a pretty easy A, and again, it goes back to going into the season. I mean, a lot of people, we weren't really, unless your name's Nolan Bianchi, not too many people really expected him to even make the team. And then when we were like, oh, he's going to be in preseason, he's going to be in camp and everything. Everybody was impressed. And then, Verana and everybody's like, okay, well, how are we going to manage this? Because they had some injury problems. And then next thing you know, Lucas Raymond is on the lineup in opening night. And then very early on in the season, he's put on the first line, and it's just never looked back. It's just, Lucas Raymond, the first liner, almost right away. And going into that role as a 19-year-old rookie coming over, again, the fan base wasn't even really convinced that you were going to make this team, period. And you make the team, and on top of making the team, you play first line minutes all season, essentially. It's remarkably impressive. The production definitely tailed off a little bit in the second half, but again, having a first liner play all 82, his production was solid. I think everybody understands and believes that he is part of the essential core future of this team. I think this is, again, about as easy of an A as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to those expectations, and I was in that camp where I didn't think Lucas Raymond coming into camp was going to make the team. And even though he was playing really well, and I mean, it didn't take long for Jacob Verana to get injured, but I thought that forward core was really stacked, especially with the signings that Yzerman had made in the offseason. The acquisition of guys like Carter Rowney, who he had signed in the offseason, and then also, keeping guys like Mitchell Stevens and Adam Ernie. I thought that the forward core was just too log jammed with vets to really have a place for Lucas Raymond. And then he showed up to camp, he showed up, he showed out, and he was phenomenal for the Red Wings, immediately earning a spot on the top line. And early in the season, we had a lot of discussion of whether or not his success came because he was playing on the top line with Tyler Bertuzzi and Dylan Larkin. But then it's not fair to make that excuse for Lucas Raymond's success and then not be able to say the same thing. Really, what it is they just had great chemistry. So, yeah, Lucas Raymond was feeding off of Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi, but it was going both ways. You could argue that a lot of Dylan Larkin's success is because he was playing with such a high IQ player like
Right.
Lucas Raymond. Because that's the one thing that stands out the most when you're talking about Lucas Raymond is his hockey IQ. Especially early in the season before the wear and tear of the season began to slow him down a little bit. You could see the wheels turning when he was making plays that veterans weren't expecting him to make. So it's just why I absolutely agree with you. He's an easy A. Just to rattle off a couple other fun facts for you guys. He was a just 0.1 relative to his teammates expected goals for percentage. And I think a lot of that took a hit during the second half of the season when the team began giving up a lot of goals against per game. You saw the flaws in his defensive game. That's something that Lucas Raymond is going to have to shore up. But by far and away, based on the expectations I had, which was I didn't think he was going to make the team, for him to go out there and have 57 points on the top line of the Detroit Red Wings, easiest A I'm ever going to give him. He also was third on the team in expected goals above replacement with 9.3. So, yeah, easy A. I don't know what else to say. Lucas Raymond, easy A. Love the
Easy
kid.
A.
Tyler Bertuzzi, another guy who, when it comes to expectations, I think it was a guy where I wasn't really sure what to expect, especially given the fact that he played 9 games last season, and then he had season-ending, was it back surgery or shoulder surgery? Someone in the comments will remind me exactly what it was. But it was a major surgery that finally ended his season after they kept it under wraps. Coming back from that, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I knew he was a 20-goal potential player, but I wasn't sure how well he was gonna bounce back. He ended the season with, I almost closed out of the tab by accident. That would have been bad. He ended the season with 62 points, 30 goals, and 32 assists. And again, you saw that with Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond. It was an even distribution of goals and assists. Tyler Bertuzzi, another one of those guys. I think Scotty easily, that entire top line, A's across the board.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think not really too much to add. You pretty much I think nailed everything. There was a lot of somewhat uncertainty about him coming off the injury, the contract situation, everything, and for him to show up and drop 30 in a season where he didn't play in a single game in Canada is pretty encouraging for what he could possibly continue to grow into. And I think that this is all highlighted by the post-trade deadline comments where Yzerman all but said, actually all and said, quite literally said, that they're trying to ink him in long-term and he's part of the long-term plans for this team. So I think this is another easy A. And on top of that, I think Steve thinks it's an easy A, which is much more valuable than anybody else's letter grade on him.
Well, and I think what makes him such a surprise this season was I saw him as a 20-goal scorer, but never in my life did I see him as a 30-goal scorer. And yeah, his 30th goal came on an empty netter with 5 seconds left in the final game. Doesn't matter. 30 goals on the season. And he did that in 68 games played because, to your credit, Scotty, he couldn't play in Canada. So he only played 68 games. You got to imagine you prorate that to an 82-game season. He's probably 65, 67 points on the season. That's it's not like an elite level production, but for a guy who's marketed for his physicality and his grit, for him to have that level of skill as well is really appealing.
And with so much success on the second line, could you imagine?
Oh yeah, that
when this team is really filled out, being able to have a 30-goal scorer on your second line for a competitive team, that's lethal. That's so lethal. So, all around. A's across the board for those three guys. Absolutely.
And he led the Red Wings in his expected goals for percentage relative to his teammates. He had a .32. He was number 1 on the Red Wings. So he was the best player on his ice in a 60-minute game compared to all of his teammates. And that is really telling to what he can do. I like to compare. people are going to think this is a bad comparison by what I'm about to say, but he is just because of how Abdulkader's season ended, but he is career ended, but he is a more skilled Justin Abdulkader. Justin Abdulkader was marketed for his grit, for his toughness, and his body unfortunately gave out. He never really had a ton of the skill you saw as soon as, and I mean, relative to other NHL talent, he's an NHL player, and so he had skill. But a lot of his production came off playing on a line with Pavel Datsyuk, and my fear was when they moved him down the second line, it was going to be a similar case. Playing with Dylan Larkin is how he got a lot of his points. No, they put him down the second line, and the second line started producing more.
Right. His style of play translates to whatever situation, whatever team, whatever line you put him on, his style of play will translate and be wildly beneficial.
It's just that so if he's a more skilled Justin Abdulkader, remember during the trade deadline, there were reports that GMs were considering him as a less skilled Brad Marchand as a compliment, because that's the type of player he is, where he can,
exactly.
He can be put in any situation because of his strength, his toughness. Like, he can get the puck, he can get down in the dirty areas, and he can dig the puck out. But then on the flip side, he's also got enough skill to bury the puck, make nice moves. Like, he's good with the puck in tight. It's just, he is like the complete package. And the only thing, you wonder about him is a player of his play style, how long they can last. But we see with guys like Brad Marchand that sometimes they don't have a problem with that. So if he can keep the skill level going, he can be a lethal weapon on this team going forward. I mean, again, easy A. I could keep going on how much Tyler and Bertuzzi impressed me this season.
Absolutely. Easy A's across the board so far.
I like it. I wonder if we'll keep that trend going. Got to talk to you guys today about BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is a continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, final segment here. We wrapped up our grades for the top line. A's across the board, which I've got a gut feeling will not continue into segment 3 here, as we spend this last segment digging into the more of the depth players on the forward core, your third, your fourth liners, and your extras. Any guy who played over 10 minutes on this team. I think the first one we should probably go to, if we're really going to pivot hard away from the super exciting players, let's knock Taro Hirose out. He played 15 games with the Red Wings. He was one of the first guys to get called up when injuries occurred. He only had 4 points in those 15 games, 3 assists, 1 goal. I think the grade for Taro Hirose is going to be pretty mild, just because I don't think expectations were all that high for him.
Yeah, for sure. Like, coming into the season, I'm not even really sure you would have been able to convince me that he would have played in 15 games. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, that in itself was just kind of a scramble because we had some injury problems at points.
For sure.
And, so yeah, like, I don't know, like if you had to put a letter grade on it, C-.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Like, not in his 15 games, he didn't wow anybody. And in his 15 games, he didn't make you think like, damn, I wish it was 16. But he also wasn't, he wasn't like, he wasn't put in like big situations. He wasn't a liability because he was getting fourth line, like 7 to 9 minutes a night. Yeah, I think a C-.
If C is meeting expectations, like we're just going C as a solid, average grade.
Right. You are what we thought you were. Right.
He, in my eyes, is the definition of a replacement level player. When we talk about goals above replacement and stuff like that, it refers to a player who is replaceable on a roster. He is that guy.
Level players, yeah.
He is the hockey version of the 4A level player. He's going to be in my opinion, will probably be a career AHLer. But when there's an injury occurs, he'll be the first guy to get called up because he will be not a complete liability when he's on the NHL sheet of ice. So looking at his more advanced metrics this season, he was a negative 0.62 expected goals for percentage per 60 minutes, which essentially means that per 60 minutes, when he is playing, when he is on the ice, he is contributing to almost -1 goal a game. Almost. And that his expected goals above replacement in those 15 games played was -0.9. So he's giving up a goal less or scoring one less goal than a replacement level player would. So that's why I give him a C- because while he wasn't a complete liability, he didn't necessarily meet that expectation for a replacement level player either. And I'm just not going to a C- because I'm also just not going to kill the guy. I mean, he got called up in a tough situation.
Right.
So like I feel like C-
Played in
is just
15
being
games and
fair.
had fourth line minutes.
Yeah.
Nobody that is put in that situation is going to be such a liability that they're going to get too much worse than a
Yeah.
C minus.
I can't kill the guy for that. He
Yeah.
came up and he played in a tough situation, and he wasn't, like I said, he wasn't a complete liability out there. He filled the role and he filled the minutes. You know, he was
Yep.
sounds rude to say this, but he was essentially a warm body for the Detroit Red Wings, which is why I give him a C-.
Yep. Agreed.
I'm gonna let you choose the next forward you want to do.
Um,
Just say a name. We'll knock her out.
let's do. You want to do Rowney?
Yeah, we can do Carter Rowney. This is an interesting one.
I
Because
think
this
so
guy,
too.
he only played 26 games. He got hurt, got
Yeah.
healthy, went on a tear, immediately got hurt again.
Right.
He ended up having only 6 points, 4 goals, and 2 assists in 26 games played. Insane shooting percentage in that span, though, 26%.
Right.
4 goals as a bottom, as a bottom 6 forward, and 3 of those came in that week when he was healthy. So he just did not take a lot of shots throughout the
It's
season.
really difficult too, like with the expectations game with him, because I think going into the season we expected him to be the 4C.
Yeah,
I
and
think
he showed,
that was the expectation, and he was that when he played, but it's hard to be like, oh yeah, like everyone expected him to be the 4C for I think the entire year, barring him being terrible. And um so I think it's a little difficult to grade based on expectation because of the injury. Like he didn't play very much, and you can't really predict or try to account for injury when you're basing, your expectations on somebody on the year. So,
well, and then you get into the interesting territory too. Is like, do you hold those injuries? Like when you talk about your expectations, do you account for injuries in the grading process? Because like part of you is like you could because
right.
you
Right.
need
That's my point. Like,
you sign to
I
be
don't
good.
think I ever want to do that.
I don't think it's right either because injuries are a freak thing that happen and he can't control that. That being said, I'm fine. I can't give him more than a C. I think when he
Right.
played, he met expectations for what we needed him to be.
Yeah. No, I think this is a pretty much a poster child C as well. And it's one of those things where, again, if he was able to play a full season, and if that like week and a half or whatever like heater he went on could have maybe been extended, a little bit longer and extended to a point where we might have been able to get some actual production out of him at the 4C, it could have been a much different story. And but I mean, he was valuable when he did play. It's really hard to give somebody who you expected to play like 75 to 82 anything more than a C because they, only played in 20 whatever games.
And when he
So
was on the
like,
ice, he was a positive asset to the Red
correct.
Wings.
Yeah.
And
So yeah, like C plus, I think
I
is
mean,
totally fair, but
I think I
um
will.
it's difficult to go difficult to go too much higher than that just because we're talking about a fourth liner at the end of the day, but it's even more difficult because of the big difference in expected games played and games ended up being played.
I think I will
Go to a C
change
plus.
my answer to a C plus because once you take into account so when he did play, He did have the 5th best expected goals above replacement on the team at 3.4. So he provided, it was expected that he would provide 3.4 more goals, than a replacement level player. And then when it comes to WAR, he's in the same spot. He provided expected WAR above, or expected wins above replacement, rather. I'm sorry, is exactly wrong column. Let me restart. His expected wins above replacement is at 0.6.
There you go.
So he provided more than a replacement level player, which is exactly what you're looking for out of a guy who you signed to be a 4th liner. So I think I will, edit it and make it a C plus, just from the fact that when he did play, was a little bit better than we signed him to be, but just by a smidge.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. C plus works for me.
Yeah. We're running out of time here. I don't know if you want to knock out one more quick one, if you also want to save it for part 2.
I think we save it.
Save it for part 2.
Got the whole first line done. Got some depth pieces done. I think that's a show.
All right, and we will be back with you guys tomorrow. Scotty, you got any final thoughts?
We ball, and Harold Castro for president.
Harold Castro for president. Thanks for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from the local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Like I said, back with you for part 2 tomorrow. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.